Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Animal Saver, where we connect you to some of the most inspiring animal welfare stories. Today, we are going to interact with Miss Sanjana Govindan from Bangalore, India. Let's talk to her to know more about her story. Hi, Sanjana. Welcome to the Animal Saver podcast series.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Same here. Sanjana, could you please give us a quick introduction about yourself, your profession, and hobbies, please?
Sure. So I am first and foremost an animal lover. My day job is I manage a venture philanthropic fund where I manage investments in the nonprofit and social enterprise space across the livelihood sector. And I get to work on the front lines of nonprofits doing incredible work, trying to improve the lives and livelihoods of people who come from backgrounds of poverty, vulnerability, and marginalization. It's also a great job that allows me to pay the bills and fuel my passion for animal welfare. And in that context, I'm the founder of the Water Bowl project. But more importantly, it's not a unique model, but I tried the first crowd-funded animal welfare campaign a very long time ago. And I'm also one of the co-founders of the Bangalore Cat Squad. And I volunteer extensively with shelters and urban wildlife groups in Bangalore like ARRC and CARE. Yeah.
Amazing. It is so inspiring to hear your, about your activities and about all the welfare programs you're associated with, Sanjana.
Thank you.
So I understand that, you are associated with human welfare programs as well as, animal welfare programs. So can you please give me an instance or a situation where probably you have got connected with animals in real? Like, how did it start? What made you connect with the animals?
So I think in my case, I've never not had a connection with them.
Okay.
And I honestly didn't know that what I had as a connection with all animals, not just stray dogs or cats, but every sort of insects, reptiles, etc. I did not realize for the longest time that that was not normal. Luckily, I had incredible parents and siblings, etc., who did not make that a strange thing. But I think the first sort of notion I had that this was not something that everybody does was when I was around 13 years old and a little stray puppy that I looked after was run over. And I called up my father and he came, midday from work because I called him up crying, and he came back and we scooped up this puppy and we went to a vet. And this so happens that this vet, we're still in touch all these years later.
Yeah.
And he had to put the puppy to sleep. And it was I was because also I was young, I was 13 years old, and it was the first time I saw euthanasia of someone I really loved because of someone reckless, because we didn't have an infrastructure to protect this little life form. I think that's when I realized, I have to do more. And this is not enough, just feeding them and playing with them, that's not enough. So
I'm so moved by the story, Sanjana. I mean, it's very moving, and yeah. So another, question here would be because you mentioned the support of your families and friends, right? Was there any instance where probably a person or an incident might have discouraged you from doing such activities, and how did you overcome that?
That's a very good question, because honestly, I think I've not met a single animal rescuer or even person who works in animal welfare who has not been confronted with tremendous odds and opposition. And in my case, the earliest sort of opposition I had was, I think there was a note that my kindergarten teacher sent to my mother saying, Sanjana releases all the rabbits every day. I don't know if you remember, in a lot of convent schools in India, they have cages with birds and rabbits. And that just defied logic for me. And when I was 4, every day I would let them out of their cages. And at that point, I remember every day getting yelled at that little age of, you have to keep them in a cage. They're not supposed to be out. And so I think that sort of was I very quickly grew a thick skin to like realize, okay, this is what you think,
Mm-hmm.
but over the years, of course, escalated into very severe cruelty. I found myself, confronting the police, confronting the legal system when there have been extreme acts of animal cruelty and people have turned a blind eye. So, everything from what time you can feed community dogs
Yeah.
to what kind of care and how much money and where they are treated are
Mm-hmm.
all things most people believe they have a say in.
Mm-hmm.
And and I faced opposition in all these areas. But like I said, right, the core reason I'm here is because I have a really, like, it's a part of who I am and what, my soul. So if I don't do it, I wouldn't be me. So yeah.
Yeah. So, like, adding up to the question, I understand that, you might have faced a lot of highs and lows through the journey. Can you tell us an instance where probably, a person has discouraged you and then, started supporting and following you later on after some realization?
Yeah, actually, this is a funny story
Yeah.
because my husband is not a committed animal lover, was not, okay, when I met him.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was raised, we're raised differently, and so his idea of a dog was, he lives outside the house, you feed him.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my idea of a pet dog was, he sleeps on my bed and it's very
Yeah.
and also because I was so familiar with rescue work, I didn't really have like a barrier between me and a stray. I would just stop and play with every animal. And he's like, oh my God, you're going to get rabies and you're not being careful. But it's very interesting that over the years, and I have picked up some incredibly, severe trauma cases and animals who've been abused and with like physical injuries that are really hard to even visualize.
Uh-huh.
He changed, and he's very supportive and helpful. Of course, he's still, he can't do any of the hands-on, but his entire approach to it and approach to the animal has changed. So, in fact, it's funny because he became vegan before I did.
Oh,
And he
interesting.
started, he kind of like started the journey and he's like, no, I don't want any animal product. And it's like 4 years ago and extremely disciplined. And so I actually credit going vegan entirely to him and the fact that, he walked the talk as much as he could. And I've seen him change entirely his perception of animal welfare and my work. Yeah. So,
Kudos to you and your husband for starting off the vegan journey. I think it's a
yeah.
very good example that you've stated to the viewers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the cooler thing is I'm raising a vegan child, which is hard because, it's everywhere she goes.
Yeah.
She's confronted by, of course, junk food and cakes but she's very self-aware and I'm grateful. But yeah, I think that's the harder part. As adults, it's easier, but to raise a small human being like that is really complex. Yeah.
Now, since you mentioned, raising vegan child, which is actually an interesting topic, which could go on and go on, but I would ask you to mention some tips and tricks, or how do you handle when it comes to nutrition to the viewers?
Right. So to give you an example, today is my daughter's birthday
Okay.
and she turns 10 years old. And so we had her
Happy
cake
birthday.
ahead of time. Thank you.
Yeah.
We had her cake ahead of time and it's a vegan cake and she was really excited about it. And of course, because of the lockdown, she had like a little Zoom party and she made it a point to tell everyone that there's no milk and no eggs and no animal products in my cake. And it's funny because when a little child is saying this to her own age group, they listen.
Yes.
And they're curious and they ask, okay, so what's in my cake? Like, why did I need one? Because yours looks great and clearly it tastes great. So I should just get yours because nobody was harmed.
Yeah.
So I think one, that's great. Like explaining the narrative will really expand how they communicate it. In terms of nutrition, I think it's definitely important to make sure they get as many, and luckily my child is not allergic to nuts.
Oh.
So we substitute, of course, dairy milk, which she wasn't on too much anyway, but it was a little bit with dairy milk, with oat and almond milk, peanut oat milk,
Yeah.
including rice flour milk. We've also
Oh.
done, we also we've substituted paneer with tofu. And she, like every kid, she loves like macaroni and cheese, and she loves waffles. So if you go to my Instagram, I'm trying recipes every now and then, but we use nutritional yeast. I also make sure she gets plenty of like leafy greens in her diet.
Yeah.
But is it anything particular to make sure that she is vitamin deficient? To be honest, I think just a balanced vegetable diet, and also because I'm South Indian, we have a lot of coconut oil in our food. We
Right.
use a lot of herbs.
Yeah.
So we're okay. Nutrition. I think it's just because we're used to this mindset of everything should have ghee or should have butter or should have milk in it,
Yeah.
that we've kind of changed a lot of traditional recipes to fit that mandate. When actually, if you go back more than 100 years ago, most of them didn't have any of that in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a journey. I don't know the answers yet, and I'm trying, but hopefully, one person at a time.
Yeah, I think this will help the viewers to get more clarity on how to begin their journey into veganism, and how to grow kids who can be completely vegan. Thank you for providing us insights regarding that. So moving on to the next question, what are the different types of animals that you've supported so far?
So, of course, like most people who are listening, I'm sure dogs is the top of the list. My journey did start with stray dogs.
Yeah.
In Bombay, especially, I grew up in a colony with lots of dogs, and so a lot of my time was spent rescuing dogs.
Okay.
It then evolved, of course, into cats. And so when I was and I didn't really have a close interaction with cats until I went to graduate school in Singapore. So Singapore has a stray cat problem because they've killed off all their dogs.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy country in the sense that, they've also got a very skewed bird population. And so there's lots of feral cats. And I used to live on the ground floor of a condominium. And long story short, I ended up with a little stray kitten, a small neonate. And I lived with two other girls, and everybody's maternal instinct kicked in and said, oh, we have to save this little cat.
Yeah.
And so I used to take him to class and all of that. Fast forward a few months, I had to come back home to India for an internship, and I had no place to keep him.
Okay.
So I ended up bringing him back. And he's in Bombay. He's 13 years old now.
Okay.
And it was like the most interesting decision because he's in many ways my first cat.
Okay.
And I remember when I took him to the vet the first time in Singapore,
I
said I don't know anything about cats, and I had even trained him to walk on a leash like a dog, and he would play like fetch with paper balls, and my vet looked at me, he's like, yeah, but he's a cat, you shouldn't do that. But I will admit my ignorance. But the great thing about him is I think he, of course, opened my eyes to cats. And as a consequence of that now, many years later, I've started the Bangalore Cat Squad where we save thousands of cats annually, both and spay and neuter community cats. We take in very severely traumatic injured cats. The other thing that I'm very interested in is urban wildlife, because I think cities have overtaken the environment that belonged to so many other animals. And this hit home for me because my brother went to IIT Bombay, and the IIT Bombay campus is bordering Borivali National Park.
Oh, okay.
And his hostel was H7, called Lady of the Lake, and it was right on the Pawai Lake, and very often they would have like leopards and things who would come into the hostel, and crocodiles, and who would walk the campus as well. And it felt so odd to me, like why would we stretch out the city so much that wildlife is forced to be pushed into urban areas? And so one of the things that I do is, of course, I volunteer for the Avian and Reptile Rehab Center here, and I do like small bird release, squirrel release, especially because when construction sites are flattened, thousands of trees are cut, and birds and squirrels who are nesting there are then homeless. Permanently homeless. So then what happens to them? So this group, of course, they rescue these birds, and then we try to rehabilitate them. They're incredible, and you must have a separate conversation with them. I'm just a humble volunteer.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so that's the bit with the urban wildlife. And of course, I do a lot of advocacy around just talking to the hardest animal of all, human beings. Explaining to children, especially moms, like the number of calls I get from women saying, "Oh, I'm pregnant. I can't have a cat because all my relatives said it's bad for the baby."
Oh, the
And,
superstitions.
superstitions. And then, of course, WebMD is my biggest enemy. Like, "Oh, I'm going to get toxoplasmosis and die, or my child will be deformed, or, the dog spit is." So that's probably the hardest group, the humans.
Yeah.
But I think patience and to having a non-judgmental conversation is a large part of also what I try to do.
Uh,
So yeah,
I
big groups.
think that you provided us with so many insights, like not to be scared of having pets no matter what phase of life you're in, right?
Absolutely.
And not to
Yeah.
I mean to advocate wildlife and
Yeah.
to not be partial towards one sort of an animal or one sort of a species. Right. I mean, those are quite interesting and informative insights that you've given us. Thank you. And so, how much time does it take for you on a weekly basis or a daily basis to go ahead and manage all these social welfare activities?
So I'm easily investing about like 15 to 20 hours a week.
Okay.
um, and just because, so from like the Bangalore Cat Squad at least, or if you go on the website and the social media, and I manage all of that,
Yeah.
and I'm not like a trained designer or anything. So I had to actually learn design skills. I had to learn how to build a website and all of that,
Yeah.
just to be able to do this. So that takes up some time. I also manage, or I try rather to do as much as fundraising that I can for
Hmm.
the BCS group. So that does take a significant amount of time.
Okay.
The other part is, of course, when I do have full-time fosters at home, that of course is 24 hours. And I personally, I still feed between 9 and 30 dogs on a daily basis. So it's a rolling number because of lockdown now. There are lots of other feeders, but I
Yeah.
have a pack of 9
Yeah.
who've been with me forever. And for example, I've had the last 4 months have been particularly hard because I've been looking after a dog with distemper.
Hmm.
And so that's, if you know about canine distemper, it's a really long, hard recovery process. And she was also pregnant, so go through the neutering. It was a really long 4 months, but luckily we have landed on the other side. And so I also documented this whole, story of how I found her, to her medication I gave, which was a combination of allopathic and homeopathic and special
Interesting.
diet, and now then had to neuter her, which was again complicated, and post care and rehab. So yeah, so a large part of what I do as well, and which takes time, is aside from the fostering, I'm trying to put the knowledge together in ways that other rescuers can understand. Because what
Hmm.
I saw in the West
Hmm.
was there's so much information for an independent rescuer. You go online and you can find out how to bottle feed, how to seal a wound, how to
Hmm.
give drips. Whereas in India, and especially with the kind of resources that we have and the limited medicines available, there is no access to a rescue on what to do, on
True.
information. So yeah, so whenever I have a poster, I try to document this and then disseminate it. Yeah. So look out for this distemper guide, which I'll drop this week.
Sure,
Yeah.
definitely. I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting again. I mean, there's so many interesting insights that you've been giving us, and I am just spellbound. And yeah, so like because you are so actively engaged, and you also have a kid at home, you have your own dogs at home, you have foster kids. Doesn't that create any conflicts between managing your personal life and your activities, social welfare activities?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, it creates a ton of fatigue,
Hmm.
especially when you lose animals.
Yeah.
So the same dog that I'm talking about, the distemper one, she
Yeah.
had 3 puppies, and all of whom had distemper, and all of whom died,
Hmm.
and all of whom I tried to save. And it was really exhausting because I had sort of set up a drip system at home and antibiotics, and it really takes everything out of you when you're
Yeah.
trying to save their life. And then
Right.
when they don't make it, it's extremely demoralizing.
True.
And especially for people who are in animal welfare and who love animals, it's not like something you forget. Like, I have a permanent gravesite in my heart of every single animal I've lost.
Yeah.
And it's not something you forget. So, and yeah, it takes a huge toll emotionally. It's also, someone asked me this recently, like you've had so many have got adopted through you,
Mm-hmm.
but you tend to remember the ones that have lost
Mm-hmm.
more than the ones that did get adopted. I think that's human nature.
Yeah.
And in terms of conflict, I think it's always a conflict about and guilt that did I spend enough time with my child? Have I invested enough time with my family?
Yeah.
So the outcome of that is I think I have the least time for myself. But
Yeah.
I still try. I still try.
Yeah, I mean, kudos again to be such a wonderful mother, to be such a wonderful, probably daughter, wife, and an animal
I,
welfare
I,
activist.
you should ask all of these people. I don't know if they'll say wonderful, but thank you. That's
I
very
think
generous.
I think they are very proud of you. I'm sure of it. And would you like to give any kind of message to the community about the pandemics that are believed to originate from animals?
Absolutely. So the first thing I think I'm really grateful for is the fact that, there are a lot of influencers online and including Maneka Gandhi who are posting information from the government, from your local commissioners, your local administrators who are dispelling myths around animals and COVID.
Hmm.
This is also an important time for you to pay attention to how housing societies, etc., treat pet owners and treat community cats and dogs,
Hmm.
because many people are using the pandemic as an opportunity to get rid of animals
Right.
under the guise of it is a lockdown.
Right.
And knowing your rights, knowing what rules prevail is going to be very important.
Okay.
Um, Having a conflict and heading for a confrontation will just mean that you are out of steam all the time. And as an animal rescue worker, remember that the race is very long, and in the end it is with yourself, and you will have many battles to fight. So if you burn out each time with every battle, you will not live to fight the next one. And there will be ones you lose,
Yeah.
but you have to keep going. So don't take up the sword for every battle.
Yeah.
Uh, Pace yourself, know your rules and know your rights, and don't allow anyone to ride roughshod on you.
Yeah. Who was the inspiration, in the field of animal welfare rights for you?
So, I mean, in India, there are, unfortunately, we don't really publicize animal welfare workers to be honest. And there are the few people, the people who made the most noise are the ones who of course, you hear. Without doubt, I would say I have the deepest respect for Mrs. Gandhi because Maneka Gandhi has fought a long, lonely battle.
Yeah.
And to be in that place takes a great deal of personal toll.
Mm-hmm.
To be constantly at odds with so many forces that do not understand and do not pay attention. So I have deep respect for her.
Yeah.
But I also have tremendous respect for all the unsung heroes who are actually workers in this sector.
Yeah.
Medical workers and not doctors or veterinarians. These are the people who are actually picking up animals from the street, who are helping you with burial.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have found, for me, real India is in all these people who
Yeah.
at that point, when I have needed help, when I have been in distress, the trauma animal in need, nobody cared about what gender, race, religion, pin code I came from. These individuals rose to the occasion each and every time, and most of them I don't even know their names. My real inspiration throughout my life has been these random strangers who work, maybe they don't, who just took 5 minutes or 10 minutes to change my day and of course save a life. So they are definitely the reason I keep going, because there have been so many cases where I thought, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to move this animal.
Mm-hmm.
And this serendipity or happenstance or the universe, call it what you may, help always came.
Yeah.
Uh, so they are my true inspiration.
I bow down to all such, people who are involved in paramedics or who are veterinarians or, in fact, anyone
Absolutely.
who's involved in animal rescue and animal welfare. And
Yeah.
yeah, so are you personally running any project or expecting any kind of support from our viewers? If yes, can
Um,
you please share the details?
So at the moment, the Bangalore Cat Squad, of course, we're a volunteer group that's self-funded, but look us up and we're always looking for funding to help our cases that are trauma cases. So
Mm-hmm.
these are electrocuted, amputated, run-over cats.
Mm-hmm.
We don't raise any money directly. So if you do contribute, it goes directly to the veterinary hospital to pay the bill of that particular cat.
Yeah.
So look us up. But like I said, I think my core ask from anybody who's listening to this is, if you can make your message
Mm-hmm.
simple, relatable to every person you meet, and you take away any negativity associated with animal welfare
Yeah.
and make it a profession and a culture that like we look at people in the armed forces or the medical field, which you can be proud of, I'd be really grateful. Because 20 years from now or 30 years from now, the real change will happen when the narrative around animal welfare changes.
Hmm.
Until then, it will still be a group of people like you and me who are on the fringe, and we need to make it mainstream. So
Yeah.
my message and ask is, do what you can to make this simple, mainstream, and real for every animal and person in the country.
Absolutely. I hope our viewers and me will, follow your story and follow your, inputs. And we'll definitely keep all of your words and
Thank
views
you.
in
And
mind.
I'm always available if anybody wants to reach out for questions. If you have any feedback or ways on which we can do our work better, please share them with me. We're always learning. So thanks again for the opportunity.
We'd love to do that. Thank you, Sanjana, for your valuable time and for sharing your inspiring journey.
Thank you very, very much for having me. This was so nice to talk to you.
Same here, Sanjana. Thank you, listeners, and I hope that Sanjana's story has inspired many of you. We will meet you soon with another inspiring story on the Animal Saver. Your place, your animals, your support.